Can a simple suspension piece save the Ferrari season? Leclerc says that SF-25 is a 99% new car, but it is also 100% problematic. And now, on the days of the Belgian GP, Vasseur launches a technical bomb that could change everything. Do they arrive on time or is it too late? One of the key problems has been driving height. Unlike previous years where the car was designed to function in a wide range, the SF-25 is extremely sensitive to any change in the chassis height. This has forced the team to make anti-natural decisions, raise the car beyond the ideal to avoid premature wear of the background iron. The rigidity of the rear suspension has also revealed its worst face in conditions of high aerodynamic load. Not absorbing vertical forces, the car loses stability in passing by fast curve. This not only reduces performance, it destroys the pilot's confidence, a key element in F1. Charles Leclerc has been particularly vocal in this regard, reporting by radio the sensation that the car floats or bounces without prior notice. To all this is added an even more delicate context. Ferrari is not the only team that has redesigned his car. Mercedes, Red Bull, and even McLaren have also implemented important changes, but they started from a solid and understood base. Ferrari, on the other hand, dismantled its previous platform, betting everything to a new concept without having enough time to validate every aspect on the track. The result has been a machine that, in theory, promises speed, but that in practice delivery uncertainty. And the most alarming thing is that these types of problems are not solved in a week. They require structural reviews, intensive simulation work, and track tests, all while the racing calendar advances without truce. Every weekend without a solution is a lost opportunity. In a season where competition is more tight than ever, that amounts to losing ground irreparably. On July 17th, Ferrari turned the Mugello circuit into the epicenter of his technical hopes. On a day that was officially a filming day, the team used the 200 kilometers authorized by the FIA not only to record promotional material, but to test one of the most crucial updates of the SF-25, a new rear suspension. Behind the event, apparently routine, a critical operation was hidden. Leclerc traveled personally to supervise first-hand work. This fact is only revealing. The technical director is not usually present in this type of activities unless the test has a significant load for the immediate future of the car. There, in the midst of the heat of Tuscany, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton shared the responsibility of testing this fundamental modification, each completing 19 laps in different configurations to obtain a variety of useful data in comparable conditions. The attention focused on the redesign of the front arm anchor point of the upper triangle of the rear suspension, a surgical intervention on one of the most complex elements of the car. The objective was to alter the behavior of the car in acceleration and compression phases, directly affecting the phenomenon known as anti-quat, or resistance to the sinking of the rear axle under load. The new suspension seeks to correct this structural weakness. Changing the angle and anchoring point of the upper arm, engineers intend to modify the instantaneous rear wheel rotation center. This adjustment allows the car to maintain a more constant height in braking and intense accelerations, which in turn improves the consistency of air flow under the car. This stability is vital for the flat fund, the diffusers, and the suction system to generate the maximum load without suffering abrupt adhesion losses. In other words, improvement is not just physical, it is aerodynamics. The bottom of the car, a key piece in the current era of the F1, needs a constant distance with the asphalt to operate at its optimal point. If that distance varies, the aerodynamic load becomes unpredictable and dangerous. The redesign of the suspension tries precisely that: reduce the variability of the dynamic behavior of the car to offer a solid base from which to configure the rest of the technical package. Another essential aspect of the test in Mugello was the collection of data in real time. Ferrari set up an additional series of sensors to monitor the vertical movement of the chassis, the compression of the shock absorbers, the aerodynamic pressure in the lateral areas of the diffuser, and the flexion in the gearbox environment. All this information was broadcast live to the box, where engineers crossed the data with previous simulations and correlation maps developed in the Maranello wind tunnel. The goal was not to look for maximum speed in Mugello. The end was to confirm that the redesign did not generate new structural problems, and that at least it extended the operation of the car. A competitive car does not need to be the fastest always, but it does need to allow its engineers to adjust variables with predictability. And that is what Ferrari had lost with the SF-25. A stable technical framework that gave confidence to both the box and the pilots. However, Mugello is not a Spa, and what works in a controlled test has yet to overcome the brutal scrutiny of a Royal Grand Prix. The question now is whether Ferrari will have the value of implementing this new suspension as an integral part of the career package in Belgium, or if he will opt for a gradual transition. Whatever the decision, Mugello's test has made it clear that Maranello's team has not lowered his arms. Just days after the Belgian Grand Prix, one of the most complex and demanding circuits of the calendar, Ferrari is facing a critical dilemma. The update in the rear suspension proven in Mugello promises stability, mechanical coherence, and better aerodynamic performance. But the big question that floats in the paddock and in Maranello is whether this modification represents a true solution or if it is simply a temporary palliative that tries to contain a deeper structural problem. Spa-Francorchamps is not the ideal place to validate a patch. The Belgian layout requires millimeter precision and comprehensive technical efficiency. Its fast curves, pronounced slopes, and high-speed sections such as Eau Rouge, Blanchiment, or Pahon will test every millimeter of the new suspension system. Any weakness not diagnosed during the tests will be exposed here mercilessly. If the car does not respond as expected, the consequences could be devastating, from the excessive wear of the flat background to a total loss of confidence of the pilots in the setup of the weekend. The implementation of a new suspension geometry is not just a change of components. It requires a complete review of the tuning, including stiffness maps, management height, compound strategy, and brake and tire thermal management. In practical terms, Ferrari will have to build a new dynamic model for the car almost from scratch. This means redoing the entire predictive set that they use for simulation, career analysis, and simulator training. It is an intensive, expensive process and loaded with uncertainty. In addition, the adoption of the new system implies an additional challenge: operational integration in a race weekend environment. Unlike an isolated test as Mugello, SP represents constant pressure, adjusted deadlines, and unpredictable climate. Making such an important technical decision under these conditions requires courage or despair. Lewis Hamilton knows it well. The 7-time world champion has not reached Ferrari to slowly rebuild. Its signing implies immediate ambition. He has shown that he can adapt, evolve his piloting style, integrate into the environment, and extract performance. But even a pilot of his size needs a tool that allows him to compete without compromising his safety or stability. If the SF-25 does not substantially improve in Belgium, it will be increasingly difficult to maintain the discourse of optimism. And then is Charles Leclerc. Monegasco has spent years being the visible face of a Ferrari in reconstruction. He has lived the illusion of having a winning car and also the frustration of seeing how the strategy, reliability, or development snatch opportunities. If the SF-25 remains an unpredictable car, the morale of the team can be broken, and with it, the internal cohesion that has cost so much. The weekend in Spa, so it is not just one more race. It is a technical fire test, but also symbolic. Ferrari must demonstrate that he has understood his mistakes, which he has learned from his own structural collapse, and is ready to be a serious contender again. This new suspension cannot simply be a patch. It must be the beginning of a real, visible, and sustainable transformation. Ferrari's immediate future depends on what happens in Belgium. If this technical intervention translates into a stable, competitive, and reliable car, it will mark a before and after. If it does not, then it will be clear that the problem of SF-25 is not in its components, but in its concept itself. The SF-25 is not simply a Formula Car one. It is the physical representation of a team that decided to risk everything to recover the lost glory. The hopes of a hobby that has been waiting for a title for more than a decade. Each screw, each carbon fiber, and each technical decision reflect not only an engineering philosophy, but a collective identity, that of Ferrari as a symbol of excellence, passion, and absolute ambition. However, that same ambition has led the team to walk along a tightrope between the necessary innovation and the technical collapse. In that context, the rear suspension update is much more than a new component. It is an act of faith, an attempt to recover control, to rebuild from the technique what the theory promised. It is a sign that Ferrari does not resign, even when the panorama seems unfavorable. The Scuderia is betting on correcting the course in full flight, something that very few teams dare to do. Because modifying the suspension architecture in the middle of the season is not just a technical challenge, it is an act of courage. It is publicly accepting that mistakes were made, and having the courage to face them immediately, without waiting for 2026. That deserves attention and respect, but also demands results. Now, the question that remains in the air cannot be ignored. Is this improvement enough? Is it enough for Hamilton and Leclerc to have a car with which to fight on equal terms? Or are we facing another failed attempt that will only prolong frustration in Maranello? The answer will begin to be written in Spa, but the trial will be continuous, race after career. Do you think this suspension can be the turning point that Ferrari needs to fight again for consistent victories? Or do you see in all this a desperate reaction rather than a planned solution? Are you seeing signs of real recovery, or simply another attempt at halfway that will be forgotten in a few weeks? Leave me your opinion in the comments.